Welcome to Module 7, Introduction to Planning and Budgeting, Finance 311, Summer 2016. What I'm going to do in this section is I've divided it out into essentially three pieces. One, I'm going to give you an overview of what planning is. Then, I'm going to talk a little bit about the planning process within an organization. And then we're going to take a look at capital budgeting. So the first two things will be in the first video, and the capital budgeting will be in a second one. So let's get started. When we look at planning, I'd like to share with you a few quotes. If you don't know where you're going, any old path will take you there. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. Now, come back to this definition of insanity, which you've always heard. It's doing what you've always done, but expecting different results. This planning is talking about it from an organizational perspective, but this planning is also applicable to you and I as individuals in life. And I start with this. It's not just a numerical exercise of taking numbers and coming together with budgets and plans. There's a simple definition of planning that I'd like to go back to. Where are you today? Where do you want to go and when? And then how are you going to get there? So this applied business planning is holistic, and it isn't just focused on the numbers. We're bringing in goals, timelines, and then how. The numbers really come in at the end. When you're looking at business planning, there's time horizons. Most organizations and firms and individuals have strategic plans. That's where are we going in the next 3 to 5 years. Then there's the operating plan, also known as a budget, and that's generally done on an annual basis, and it's fairly detailed. There's many ways that you can do this. A plan, whether it be strategic or budget, establishes measurable outcomes in order to evaluate progress. You can have the goals, you can articulate them, you can have strategies, but how are you going to measure? And they're both financial and business. So you've been studying companies and you know that they're selling something, making something, developing something. So these metrics can be around the business. We're going to open up so many new stores. We're going to introduce so many new products. Or we're going to achieve a sales level of this. Or we're going to reduce expenses to this, and we're going to have a gross profit of that. So plans always have some measurable outcomes. And planning is prospective, looking into the future, where financial reporting is historical. You need to make assumptions about what's going to happen in the world in which you do business. Those are the external factors. And internal factors. What's going to happen in the company? So external factors could be what is the growth in the economy, how fast technology is coming into place, whether we saw that in the retail business this past winter, competition coming into play, and then there's internal factors. What is our organizational structure? Can we change the process of how we do things? So you need to make assumptions around that. What kind of pay raises are we going to give people? Because part of the pay raise in the employment strategy is influenced by the external, but how we respond to that is the internal assumptions. So we need assumptions. The next is scenarios. When you're doing planning, there's different scenarios that could happen. How is the firm going to behave under different situations? And I like to refer to them as good, better, and best. So we're looking at this. This could be, one, how is the firm going to behave if we're going to have status quo, no change in the broad economic structure? Or is it going? What's going to happen if it becomes bad? What if it's going to become better? Sort of what we looked at in the capital structure, making those scenarios. I like to call it good, better, best, because if I'm really losing money, then I need to do something. So my good is really a declining market or break even, because the purpose of the firm is financial sustainability, and I don't know necessarily that I want to plan a loss. I have to be aware of what happens if the economy turns sour, but to anticipate what actions will I take so I don't have losses. And the better, that's sort of my BAU, and then the best if everything comes together. So when we're doing this planning, business planning, we got to keep in mind it's prospective. We need to make a series of assumptions, and then we need a number of scenarios to determine what's our range. This is not an exact science of here's our plan and we will do it. It's what direction are we going? How can we get measurement? Applied business planning is about the business in totality, not just about the numbers. The numbers reflect the impact of business actions. If we are going to open 50 new stores, then we will see the impact of those 50 stores in our sales, our cost of goods, our overhead. If we're an airline and we're going to add 5 new routes, then we're going to be able to see the impact of that on our sales, cost of goods sold, and our profit. So it's the reflection. It's not the other way. Strategies are action plans. Okay, what are we going to do? Financial plan is the reflection of those actions. To be effective in a plan, it has to be usable and meaningful to everything the firm does. It has to have relevance. Okay, and it's built by the business. Everybody in a firm has a part to play. And defining that out is what makes the plan successful. If everybody knows where you're going, and I mean everybody has an idea what this plan is, what their role is, okay? And I think if you look at Walt Disney World, everybody's job is twofold. One, keep the park clean, and the second is to create happiness. So everybody understands their role within the context of those two business objectives of Walt Disney World. It helps businesses make decisions and anticipate the future. Okay, so it's a tool to make those decisions. If I am planning on opening up a store, this gives me a tool or a framework to work within, and it anticipates what may or may not happen when I have different scenarios. A workable business plan ties the activities that are done into achieving what you want to achieve. So if I want to achieve a sales level or a profit level, I may need to increase the number of stores I have, the volume each store may produce, or if I'm looking at the airlines again, the percentage of seats filled that I need to have. Maybe I shouldn't run at 75% full. Maybe I should run at 90% full. So we need to align them, and they got to be focused around outcomes. Doing something because we've always done it or because it's an activity, it needs to be seen how does it cause the outcome. Everybody involved needs to look at the task they're performing and understanding how it helps achieve the goal. A business plan should be limited to a few items on 2 to 3 pages. I've seen business plans that are 200-300 pages long, and when I sit down with the folks and say, well, what is this telling me? So many of the owners of business, presidents, CEOs, they don't really know, okay? Because it was put together by so many people and it sits on a shelf and it's not actionable. The best plans that I've seen are 2 to 3 that everybody can understand. A business plan is about, first, understanding the needs of customers, suppliers, employees, and owners. What does the customer want? What are the needs in the understanding the supplier? What's going on there? Our employees, our owners. That becomes important when we put a plan together. You have to define success. How will we know if we're successful? That's a harder thing to do. How are you going to prioritize outcomes? Letting things go. You can't do everything, and you can't do everything at once. you have to prioritize. And that's a hard thing for people to do because we've got to do all of these different things. I'm working on a project now at the West Side Farmers Market where we're building a co-op, and we want to get up to about 15 to 20 products in the co-op. But we can only do 2 to 3 at a time. So it will actually have to take us a month or so to get to that level. Even though many people want it on day one, we just can't do it based on the resources that we have. So we've got to let things go. We have to focus on the process of achieving outcomes. That's our 4 friends: who, what, when, and where. Any planning that you do, you go through the same thing. If it's missing one of them, for example, we haven't defined who's going to do it, we might say what, when, and where, but if you don't have the who, there's nobody to do it, nobody to be held accountable. The other thing is, don't reinvent the wheel. If something's working today, don't reinvent it. You can make it better, plan, do, check, act, but don't reinvent something. Identification of resources needed. What are you going to actually need to do that? So if you have this who, what, when, and where, what are the resources you need to do that? How much will it cost us? Reach out to others. This is a great thing to do. There's a lot of knowledge. We can reach out to customers, suppliers, employees, owners, get input. How are we going to quantify and measure this? Then we get into planning occurs as part of every business. Everybody plans. They either do it on a piece of paper or in their heads. You plan the products and services you have to offer. You plan what hours you're going to be open if you're retail, or what hours your plant's going to work, or when your planes are going to fly. You're going to schedule your employees. You're going to purchase goods. You're going to have a marketing plan. You have many plans. And in many cases, you often identify who needs to do what. A business plan ties this all together and quantifies it. The business plan looks at what is being done and how does it impact where the market is going. It's about cause and effect. Okay? Everything is about cause and effect. And this includes your studying. It's an alignment of activities opposite the goals. The plan involves, again, who, what, when, and where. I keep going over this because we got to see how we align things. What is the cause and effect? Stuff doesn't happen. If we simply come up and say, we're going to have sales grow by 10%, and we don't have those strategies in place, they will never happen. But that requires us to know what we need to do to grow sales, and then to determine an action plan of who, what, when, and where this will be done. Simple definition of planning: where are you today? Where do you want to go and when? How are you going to get there? That works for you as an individual for your career plan, for any business plans you're involved in, any activity you're doing. Okay? Why do firms fail? I think it's important to look at this because I think one of the reasons firms fail is they don't have a solid business plan, and they do random activities, and random activities are not successful. And when you look at the details of why firms fail, customer needs are not being met. You may think you know what the customer wants, but until you really start knowing your customer becoming part of the business process, you need to produce what they want, not what you want. Employees and suppliers' needs are not being met. Okay? You're not creating an environment that employees like to work for. Suppliers aren't getting paid. Owners' needs are not being met. I will tell you that many owners' needs, such as getting a salary if you're in small business, getting a return, are not being met. They're doing a lot of work, but they're not getting the outcome. In many cases, a lack of the owner understanding of a financial business model. Just watch The Profit on CNBC, and you will see most of that situation is the owners have no clue what's going on from a financial perspective because they don't have a business plan that ties the activities to the financial results. And that's what the prophet does, is he comes in and he works on cash flow, working capital, cash conversion cycle. This is what we've been talking about. So if you've really been able to absorb and understand cash flow, working capital, cash conversion cycle, you're ready to do planning. Okay? And it's taking the concept of what is historical and making it prospective. Profitability model. Okay? Owners don't know how much money they're making on selling a certain product. Bigger businesses may. What's the difference between variable and fixed cost? Okay? What you saw is that in cases of airlines and retail stores, you saw that as revenues go up, certain expenses will go up. But then other expenses won't go up. And that's the fixed versus variable. They look at capital structure. Okay? We just spent substantial time on that. And then, honestly, there's just bad luck, natural or other disasters. There were a number of businesses who were ready to open, and Sandy came in and destroyed them. That's just bad luck. Okay? But let's look for a moment at what causes needs not to be met. One, you don't understand them. Okay? That you don't know what your customer wants. Or if you understand them, you don't have a plan to meet the customer's needs. Or the plan is not executed. Sometimes it's the latter. People do try to find what the customer wants. They come up with a plan. And then the last one is what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about some of the organizational terms that come into place when you're budgeting and planning within an organization. The first is senior management. Every company has a group of senior officers consisting of the CEO, COO, president, CFO, and others leading the company. They're oftentimes referred to as the senior management team, the senior management council, the leadership team, executive group, any number of it. These are the people that are responsible for the organization as a whole. Then what you have is business units. These are organizational units of the company. Companies are broken down into different organizational pieces. Sometimes they're product focused, sometimes they're geographically focused, and sometimes they're industry focused. Product focused, let me use the bank as an example because that's one that I'm most familiar with. On a product focus, you may have a mortgage department, you may have a trust department, you may have an auto loan department. Then on the geographical side, in New York State, we had Western Region, Rochester Region, Syracuse Region, North Country Region, Albany Region, New York City, Westchester, Long Island. So these were geographically focused units. Then you might have industry focused, those that specialize in supporting a specific industry. Okay, that could be like printing companies, grocery stores, whatever that is from an organization. So those are called the business units. And these are organizational units that when you pull them together, make up the organization. Senior management manages these different business units. And there's often heads of business units, and responsibility, budgeting responsibility, holding people accountable generally is done at this business unit level. Yes, senior management is responsible, but these are the guiders. These are the people who are going to implement and do the work. Okay? Then there are support units. Okay? Oftentimes they're aligned with the business unit. So if you're geographic focused, you may have a IT department, not so much IT, but you'll have facilities, you might have finance, you might have HR. So these are groups that are either aligned with the business or they support multiple businesses. Okay? We had HR people who supported us across New York State. Okay? So you want to understand that planning and budgeting is internal to the company. Okay? It's not based on history, It's developing a forecast that is based on history. So we're more concerned about where we're going from a quantitative perspective. Okay? So senior management always wants the best. Okay? They're going to establish targets and goals. The business units are going to try to, how are they going to achieve those goals? And then the support units are, how are they going to support them? Now remember, in every organization, there's limits. Okay? There's financial limits. There's other limits that get in the way. You just can't go out and do something. There's got to be an evaluation process. Now, when we get into the different approaches to budget, there's a couple, some terms, and a lot of what we're going to talk about in these segments are more about terms and understanding of what goes on as much as applied. When you look at some of our earlier lectures, you were applying it to your company. So the first thing is what we call zero-based. You start with nothing and build on a sense of assumptions. The biggest value of this is effectively that it makes everything be rethought. Every process, every person, every product, every price, cost, etc. And it can be very useful in eliminating unnecessary expenses. In reality, most firms, though, start with the history as a base and build from there. There still is a set of assumptions, okay, that need to go into this. But you start with where you've been, and you'll say, okay, we're going to grow this by 5%. We're going to reduce costs by this percent. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But it's based on a set of assumptions. So zero-based, you start with absolutely nothing, and you build from the ground up, okay? In reality, there's this history as a base approach, okay? There's what we can also refer to as a bottoms-up. This isn't a zero-based because you're starting at every business develops a budget, whether that be business unit, operational unit, and you roll to the top. Oftentimes, these are the most realistic and obtainable. But at the same time, you can sandbag, okay? Everybody wants to look good in the future. So if I think I can grow by 5%, I'm going to, honestly, being honest, I'm going to try to put my plan in at 3% so when I actually do grow by 5%, I look good, okay? So there's that gets into there. Now, the disadvantage of this is senior managers this may result in, when you add up all the parts, senior management may not like the answer. So I might put in my business unit's growing at 3, even though I think it's going to be 5. They think I should be growing at 7. So what happens in a bottoms up is I would spend weeks, if not a month, working on my budget. Okay? And I'd come up with this grand plan that I would know what I can do to achieve 3%. And 3% I felt fairly comfortable with. So I'd go through and I'd build my budget. I'd break it down into personal goals, what everything is. So if I had to have a wealth management goal, means earn so much in commissions, I knew how many interviews I needed to have to get this dollar amount in sales. And I knew how many phone calls and contacts I needed to make to get the appointment, and I assumed a close ratio. So I had built this very elaborate plan, and I'd come up with 3%. I came up with 5, but I said 3. Then we'd add it all together, and then everybody would say, oh my God, that's the wrong answer. We need to grow at this. So then we'd go back and we'd moan and groan, and we'd try to figure out where we are. Now, what happened is that we lost, in many cases, you lose this realistic and obtainable number. Okay, so even though I was sandbagging, more was expected to me, the real number was probably 5, not 7, not 3, but 5. Because budgets need to be challenging. Now, the other approach, and this doesn't have anything to do, again, with zero-based or whether it's based on a historical piece, it's how it's prepared. Okay, from a top-down perspective, senior managers define what they want to see, and the business come up with them. This oftentimes results in unobtainable targets that can't be obtained, and that causes problems down the road when you can compare actuals to the budget. It can create a challenge for line managers too. Now, In reality, that's going to eliminate the step that I talked up here, is this multiple iteration of a budget process. So those are approaches. What you should remember on this is there's zero-based, historical-based, and then it can be prepared from the bottom up or the top down. Okay? What's budgeted? It's not just financial numbers. We'll get into sales. How many units? What's the price that we will have? What will be the sales approach? How many people will there be involved in this? What are their development plans? What is their compensation plans? It's most effective when everything is tied together. So that's what's budget. And they oftentimes mirror, when you're all done, how the financial statements will look. So oftentimes when you have the internal financial statements on a summary company basis, your budget will mirror that. Same thing when you break it down into the business unit and into the support units. Now, there's a difference between internal and external budgets / estimates. Budgets are an internal tool and not available to the public. Now, the firm may provide guidance on the future within ranges, but budgets are used to manage the company. A major focus of the company is on budgets. That's how managers oftentimes manage the company, is looking at actual results and comparing it to budget. What did we expect? And then what's the difference? So sometimes we'll look at what's the difference from historical perspective, but then we look at how is that to our plan. So this is sort of the internal view. Externally, analysts, and these are people who are not part of the company. These are people who work for investment banks, buy side, sell side, etc., and they create their own estimates of company performance. This is for large companies that are traded based on the company's strategy and past performance. So you have these analysts who know at times more about the company, I think, in my opinion, than the company itself. But these analysts come up with estimates for everything from sales to profit to earnings per share. And together, they're called consensus estimates. So you might have 20 analysts and they come together and this is their consensus on what earnings will be based on what the company has done in the past, what their strategies are, what they're saying they're going to do, and then other analytics that the analyst will apply. And some of them will be going all the way back to understanding what's happening with suppliers. And the financial markets are looking to firms to achieve consensus to hit those earnings. If they do, that's good. If they exceed them, the company's stock price will generally increase or decrease if they fail to hit them. But they could make a very good profit. And we've seen this in the past few weeks, but they've reduced their guidance for the future. And that's not always good. So it's about putting these things together. We won't know what the budget of the company is. That's something that's internal to the company, and that's how the company manages. But the company oftentimes will give guidance of what they think is going to happen. And then there's the outside analysts who are going to come up with this consensus estimate for the key numbers. The financial markets watch these earnings because the valuation of a company is a function of the future cash flow, which is a function of sales, income, and growth. So that gives us the basic introduction to planning and budgeting, a little application within the company, and what we're going to look at next is we're going to take a look at capital budgeting. Please let me know if you got any questions.